Hi everyone, I'm Christian Chapman, and in this video I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what kind of a perspective having foreign parents can lend. Ultimately, I found that having an understanding of a foreign culture can help you understand or see opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise considered. Before I get into too much detail though, I guess I should give you some background about myself. My dad, who's from Oregon, moved to Mexico and met my mom, and then they got married and moved back to the United States, where they had a kid, and then they had another kid who was me. Being raised here by a foreign parent has given me a cultural context that's a bit different than that of those fully native to the United States. The U.S. Census Bureau defines people like me as second-generation immigrants. That is, anyone who was born in the U.S. but has parents who are from other parts. I thought I was being raised pretty normally, but then realized that some aspects of Mexican culture had carried over to me from my mom, and other kids couldn't relate to these aspects. And it wasn't just me. Other people I've met with foreign parents also shared similar differences. I got an interview with Dr. Youngin Gilmore, whose parents were born in North Korea. They moved to America when she was really young, so she's been surrounded by both cultures for as far back as she can remember. There are three main areas where we found that our cultures definitely differ from that of others. First, and probably most apparent, is food. As I'm sure you're well aware, most Mexican food is pretty dissimilar to styles of cooking from the US. Even what Americans call Mexican food is pretty different than what Mexicans actually end up eating. So whenever Mom cooked us any food, she would generally try and throw in a bunch of weird condiments to make it taste more like what she was used to eating in Mexico. We've tried serving this style of cooking to a few Americans, but have found that their appreciation of these condiments is fairly hit or miss. Youngin shared her perspective on the topic by noting that just having the knowledge of multinational cuisine through her parents reduced her apprehension for trying out new foods. In support of this, Dr. Carmel Houston Price et al. From the University of Reading School of Psychology published in the Journal of Appetite a study showing that even preliminary exposure to foods at a young age will make people feel more comfortable trying them in the future. So even though we're not quite there yet with food, I imagine popular culture in the United States will continue to be affected by the trends like these as it tends towards heterogeneity. After all, we can already see how foreign culture is assimilated in music. There's plenty of documentation of things like the British invasion back in the 80s when bands like the Beatles brought music from overseas to prominence in the US. At the time of making this video, the Billboard Hot 100 is also loaded with foreign tracks like those from One Direction, Pitbull, Psy, and others. On top of that, we're also starting to see a takeover in sports like soccer, which is huge almost everywhere in the world but is only just starting to seep in the US. The second cultural difference I found in our background is in education. In Mexico, there's a lot less opportunity to get a high level of education, so most people end up choosing from any of the career choices that were available to them. That generally means that the high achievers in society pursued things like apprenticeships to become millwrights, electricians, mechanics, etc. Mom, having grown up in this sort of environment, pushed very hard to get us into college so that we could have more liberty to choose what kind of career we wanted. Youngin shared a similar experience. In her own words, she recounted,
"It wasn't if, it was when we went to college. For Mom and Dad especially, who had friends who starved and worked 3 jobs and slept only 2 hours a night to get educated, the idea of not furthering my own education didn't make any sense."
The prevalence of this attitude is confirmed in a study in the Journal of Educational Psychology by Seth Haven and Dr. James Porter, a professor of psychology at Ohio State University. The study shows that, on average, second-generation immigrants tend to put forth more scholastic effort than their peers. My point in presenting this research is not to try and show that people from the US don't care about their schooling. After all, the effort exerted by second-generation immigrants is only possible because the US educational system allows our entry into their schools. I think one of the major contributing factors to why this study might say that we work harder is just because we grow up with our parents telling us about how much of an opportunity it is to be in America where education like this is even possible. The last major difference I noticed between these two groups is in the customs we have. I know entire books have been written on weird cultural behaviors, so I'm not going to go into too much unnecessary detail. Namely though, my mom raised me with some weird medical practices that are probably a little bit less than scientifically confirmed. For example, my mom has this thing that when a wind blows you should cover your mouth to keep from getting a disease. She's told me that I shouldn't eat fish before going swimming so they don't get the bends. There's also this topical spread that they sell at Walgreens called Vicks Vapor Rub, and apparently it heals everything, including headaches, bug bites, indigestion, hangovers, and the list goes on and on. Youngin says that in Korea they use similar methods, but those involve hot baths, soups, teas, and stuff like that. Having grown up in the US where modernistic worldview is widely accepted, neither Jungian nor I put very much trust into these sorts of cures. Despite this, some research suggests that these cures are coming back into prominence. Even if some folk remedies are purely psychosomatic, that doesn't mean that some people still can't get a little bit of relief from them. And considering the high medical costs right now in the United States, I think that this is a net positive for society.
So we've just looked at 3 characteristics of the differences in culture between second-generation immigrants and their peers. But what does it all mean? My major takeaway from this is that having the perspective of a foreign group can help build up any culture. Most cultures really aren't all that different. But more important than that, whatever discrepancies there are between 2 groups, more often than not, having a perspective of a different culture is beneficial to whatever culture you're in. I think people aren't really that different if they just understand where they're coming from.